And I don't know about you, but I'm still feeling it.
You adjusted beautifully yesterday morning. I never...
Joanna's referring to the fact that I was a wreck all of yesterday morning.
Guys, listen. So we get here 6:45-ish. We try to start rehearsing at 7 a.m. on Sunday mornings. Kirk let us know in more than one way, including just saying it out loud, that he kind of thought he was still asleep and dreaming.
I felt like I was in a dream state.
For about the first hour and a half to 2 hours. Then as I was rewatching the sermon or the service to get ready for this, like, how many times did you mention it? You're like praying. Thanks for waking us up, Lord.
I mentioned it 2 or 3 times. Well, sometimes I just want to make sure people are paying attention to this prayer that we're all having together. That's
I loved
really.
it.
I can't. Oh yeah, and after the first service, Alex Jones comes up. Alex Jones, he plays not the. That's right. I have to specify this. Not the talk show host Alex Jones. Although I wish he would come to church. No, this is our good friend Alex Jones who plays the bass. He comes up to me. He's introduces me. He's dating this girl, very sweet. And I said, well, you need to get up there, Alex. You know, we're about to start the next service. And he was like, I'm not playing today. I was like, right.
And then Kirk heard a voice off in the distance going, wake up, Kirk.
So I'm going to start to shake. What? 5 more minutes, Mom. I was joking about that like all of this has been a dream. And I'm still 11 years old. And my mom is like waking me up to at 9:30 for homeschool to begin. So
pretty much, year after year, I feel it on Tuesday or Wednesday. Like Tuesday or Wednesday, I'll be sitting at my desk or something, and I'll be like, oh, we sprang forward, and it's just now hitting me. I don't know. It's an interesting delay.
Well, I'll pray for you tomorrow.
Maybe we can even each other out on that. You can come wake me up.
I'll tell you who felt it yesterday was my children, because the behavior, everything just changes so monumentally. That 1 hour. And then I'm trying to put him to bed last night, and as you know, like sometimes these tender moments of putting them to bed are interrupted with existential questions. And their one last night was, "Well, Dad, what is happening? Why is time changing?" And I was.
And you heard a voice in the distance saying, "Wake up!"
Right.
And then my child's head split open.
That's right. And it was our house, but it was our old house. And my teeth started falling. So they asked me this question, and I opened my mouth to start to describe it. I was like, just go to sleep.
Just go to sleep. I knew you were going to say that.
I'll try to tell you another time.
Well, look, you can show them the recap today.
Yes.
I'm going to answer all their bedtime questions.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, tonight at bedtime, just say, look, just listen to this, go to sleep, my children, and they can just learn all about, the Oscars, the recap, whatever makes it in there.
We're cutting all the Oscars stuff out. I will tell you, as much as I would like to make a joke about my kids falling asleep to how boring they think their father is, if I offered to show them any kind of video or audio before bed, they would be riveted. And their eyes would be wide open for the next 30 minutes.
So speaking of daylight saving time, since we haven't already referred to it enough yesterday and today, I did look up some facts because I was like, do we need to talk about some trivia? And I was like, no, because we've done that before, but we didn't. I did it with Josh Knierim on the church at Old Town's recap. God rest his soul.
So we have trivia now about daylight savings time itself.
I was just going to see if you knew some things. The top one, so I just told you before we came in here, I had this fabulous idea, but I have a feeling we're not going to be able to do it.
To talk about the Death March of Bataan, like Pastor was talking about?
No.
Okay.
But I just looked up spring forward trivia.
Okay.
The very first thing that comes up, the creation of daylight saving time is often credited to, do you know what famous forefather?
I'm guessing it's Benjamin Franklin.
It is Benjamin Franklin. Yeah. This is the part you're really going to appreciate. Who first wrote about the idea in a letter to the editor of the Journal de Paris in 1784.
Okay.
Franklin merely suggested Parisians should wake up earlier to save money on lamp oil and candles, and more importantly, he wrote it as satire.
So Benjamin Franklin introduces this idea satirically.
And here we are, generations later.
let the record show that
dreaming through Sunday morning.
That's how committed Americans are to making fun of the French. That we will take this satirical article and turn it and we will make it the law of the land.
Yes. There is not a definitive like this is who said we should do this, and then this is when it was implemented kind of thing. And it's not a federal law, as we know. It's some states observe it, some do not.
That is true. So it's not a federal law at all. It's just not something that the states cooperate on.
Most do. I mean, some still choose not to be a part of it.
Is it Kentucky? Is it Indiana? I think it's Indiana. Thank you guys for your riveting attention.
I have to fact check.
I think that is really interesting that he writes. So 1784. When did it start becoming adopted into law? I know a lot of it had to do with farming, and then I guess some of it had to do with like schooling, and kids go to school, and
I remember sharing this one with
while the sun shines
with Josh that some people say it's credited to an entomologist who just wanted extra time to study bugs.
So nobody knows where it came from. Surely we can trace this history.
Surely, let's just skip the recap. The sermon recap, and let's dig into that.
Do some research.
Let me go back to your other question. You're just moving a little too fast for me.
So
Look,
sorry.
I am not Pastor Mac.
Listen.
All right, full list of states, territories that don't do daylight saving.
Okay.
Arizona, with the exception of the Navajo Nation.
Oh, okay.
Hawaii, and then territories American Samoa, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands.
I would say Mariana.
Puerto Rico,
and
the U.S. Virgin Islands.
I think that it's interesting that Arizona does not observe it, but the Navajo Nation does. You'd think that the Navajo would be like, I don't want to have anything to do with the palefaces and their laws about how time passes. We're going to do our own thing. So I find that very interesting.
Yeah.
How do people not get, like, timing off?
They do, I think. I think you have to be somewhat knowledgeable when you're traveling, or I guess now the phone just does it.
Well, these days the phone just does it. Although there was a controversy those years ago when for some reason the iPhone didn't shift over, and so many people woke up late and that sort of thing.
So iPhone will like submit to Arizona's rule of like, oh, we're not doing daylight saving.
I guess if you have.
If I was.
I'm very impressed with your.
Yeah,
texting,
my wife's calling me.
No, I'm not faulting you for it. I was genuinely impressed.
That's one of the ways that I'm trying to be more Gen Z, like just to text without looking at my phone.
Yeah.
You know, I want to be able to watch a show and text at the same time. Have you seen those memes
while
about
listening to a podcast?
Yeah, like how different generations watch TV. I don't know. I could go into it, but I interrupted your flow.
This one. Pastor always talks about being ADHD. This is really, we're all over the place. Do you guys watch television with the captions on?
Ooh.
You do, don't you?
Absolutely.
Do you, Pike?
Every time.
Just watching TV?
Sometimes.
Every time.
All the time.
With the captions?
Yeah.
You know, there was a period in my young life when I did, but I don't do that anymore. Why?
I'm just
when
curious.
I did?
Yeah, why did you?
Well, at the time, I think it was because, I think I remember this. I was watching on kind of a cruddy TV, and I was watching Raging Bull, that Martin Scorsese movie, and I could not understand what anybody was saying. And I'm like, everyone's talking about how well this is written, so I'm going to turn the captions on. And I did, and I left them on for a while. But I can't,
okay.
I don't know about y'all, but if the captions are on, I can't like see what's happening at the same time.
So Ken hates it, which is funny because both of our girls have every streaming that they have it default to that. They always, every single show, they want captions on.
Why?
And if you try to turn it off on them, they're like, I literally can't. So again, we could probably talk a long time about this.
This is another younger generation
The
thing.
social media do. You know, all the short form videos, they have the captions on.
Well, I think it's that, but I also wonder if it's just not that they, that maybe their auditory, like comprehension has actually, like as a generation, actually lessened, that they have to have a visual to go along with it. You know, if we think about us coming all the way from sitting around a radio, not me, I'm not that old.
The wireless.
Before you say anything, Josh Pike, sitting around the radio.
I didn't even think about that.
Listening to, Little Orphan Annie or whatever. And
I
then
don't
fast
even know
forward
who that
to,
is.
and I guess I'm like,
Story.
huh? Christmas story, yeah.
Listen to the president give one of his fireside
I don't know. That's
chats.
another thing I would be interested in all of my extra time to like dig into a little bit, because it is a thing.
Yeah.
They kind of across the board, a certain age group seems to always want those captions on, which is interesting because they are usually doing something else. So like they're looking at something else, but they're
the captions in the actual movie.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
know. So you are a captions on person.
I just watch captions. That's just what I do now. I only watch the movie.
You just watch all
Just
captions.
watch the caption, the movies in the background.
Yeah. Well, you're right that
This
the
is where
social media,
filmmaking
now
is
you have
headed.
that. I thought that the social media, like they have the captions on there because you're in situations so often, like when
on
you're
mute.
sitting on the toilet,
One
where you
thing-
can't like watch it with
Yeah.
the sound on. That was supposed to be funny.
Well,
I thought that's why they do
Kurt
it.
needs complete silence.
But it's one thing. It's that, but there's the aesthetic. Like it's aesthetically pleasing to see the fast words go when they're talking. It's also, I think, because a lot of us now watch shows that you probably didn't have on TV growing up, like British shows and like different stuff in different languages.
Yeah.
It's just like a normal thing to watch on Netflix.
Well, if something
You
is in a
gotta have
foreign
captions.
language, I heavily support
Yeah.
the
Or
captions.
British. Like you can't always hear what they're saying because they're British.
Yeah.
You just need to
They are
train your
talking a
ear.
different language.
You just need to listen to a few British books on like 1.75 or 2 speed, and you'll be able to understand every word they say.
Pastor, do you really go that fast?
Well, yes.
1.75.
On regular books, on normal English people.
Yes.
But on the British books, it really just depends on the
narrator.
strength of their accent, yes.
I
And
see.
the Irish, I will say the Irish brogue, I do have to slow that down a little bit. That one can be very tricky too.
I do a lot of podcasts on 1.5, but I get overwhelmed if I go any faster than that. And there's some, like, I'm listening to this Francis Schaeffer book right now, and I have to keep that at like the basic speed because it's like,
Well, yes, and
It's
that's
so
the other
much to
exception is
absorb.
if it's a more heady book, I definitely slow it down. But yeah.
1.75x. Yeah, so Pastor told us last Monday how next year I think he's at least penciled in for a commitment to go and preach in London. And I asked him if he's planning on taking a translator, which I was very
I'll
pleased.
volunteer.
I was
I
very
can do it.
pleased with myself because I thought I was like, do they understand South Carolinian?
So if he references watching videos with the captions on while he's on the toilet, as you so
Yes, I doubt that he would
delicately
ever.
mention, I could
Yeah,
say
perhaps.
the loo. I'll just
The loo.
very quickly.
Yeah.
He means the loo.
Yeah, I shouldn't have mentioned that. Jared will have
Cut
to
it
cut
out.
that. Jared will cut that
The
one out
best stuff's
too.
not even gonna make it in there today.
Yeah,
So-
just cut it all out, Jared.
Okay, so
Yes.
now rewinding again because
All right,
as
back
I
to
said,
daylight
there's
savings
absolutely
time.
zero format to what we're doing today.
Yes.
Unlike you and Pastor Mac, it's very
Yes,
delineated.
very regimented.
Yes.
I know. He leaves and it all falls apart.
So whenever I read that Benjamin Franklin fact, though, about the piece being satirical, I thought about one of your favorite things in the whole wide world.
Satire?
Yes.
Comedy?
And specifically,
Letter writing.
The
to
Babylon
friend.
Bee.
Yes, of course. One of my favorites. How could I forget the Babylon Bee?
So I was like, oh, what would be fun is if I gave Kirk a quiz. Is it a Babylon Bee headline or a
Ooh,
real
now
headline?
I like this.
You have to delete all of this.
I'm making that a rule.
I don't even, either way, that's hilarious. So what else do we have to talk about with regards to daylight savings? Was there more there?
I mean, no. Some people deserve it, some people don't. I did read on average, people only lose about 40 minutes of sleep. So why does it feel like 40 hours?
That's what I want to know. Yeah, what the psychological...
I think it more has to do with, like yesterday, the sun, which I'm a fan of, just
Yeah,
to be clear. I do
circadian
not
rhythm
like whenever
changes.
I leave work and it's already dark outside.
that's
I much
difficult.
prefer the more sunlight. But
Yes.
it was still like you're just doing your thing and then you look up at the clock and you're like, wait, it's 8?
Yeah.
Like, how did it get to be 8 p.m.? So I think it's that disorientation.
It's frustrating. Our place where we eat supper has there's just windows everywhere. So in the winter, it really is depressing when we're eating supper and it's just pitch black outside. I'm like, it's 5:30. This is crazy. So yeah, I really start to enjoy this time and eat and like, oh, you want to go for a walk after supper?
Huge fan.
Just great. We do that even when it gets really hot outside. We'll still just throw on some bug spray and go out. So yeah, overall, 2 thumbs up to daylight savings time. It is a difficult transition. I think overall it's worth it. And it's one of my. I know I complained a little bit yesterday, but it's probably my favorite holiday of the year, and it's not a holiday that's kind of a joke. So. Speaking of holidays, though, shout out to friend of the show, Christy Blackwell, who on Wednesday night, really, I've always been a big fan of Christy.
Who is not?
I don't. Yeah, who
and
who
if
is
you
not?
aren't, just stop watching right now.
Shame on you if you're not a big fan of Christy Blackwell.
Somebody just left the room.
She has she has long been such a wonderful help in choir, and on Wednesday night, I'm just like I'm being dumb, as I often am, just about like how, well, this year Easter falls on a Sunday, but next year Easter's going to fall on a different Sunday, and we're just laughing. And she's like, I don't understand why this is so difficult. It's always the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring solstice.
Equinox. You keep saying solstice.
I thought it was a solstice.
No, it's equinox. At least according to Christy Blackwell.
After the spring equinox. And I'm just like, and I just stared at her, and I had no comeback because I'd never heard anyone actually explain that. And so I just started laughing, and I made her repeat that 3 times, and I thought I had it, but obviously I'm still mixing up my solstices and equinoxes, which, who doesn't?
Yeah.
I also looked up how, because I thought that you were going to quiz me on this, and I was trying to figure.
There just wasn't a lot. There was a lot of material.
I
was about to tell you. Do you know the holidays that are established by the lunar calendar?
I looked up 6 of them today.
Okay, so Easter.
Easter is the one that we know about. That's right. Another. So Easter is also mostly coincident with Passover.
Yes.
Which is obviously that's actually the first. That's like the Jewish New Year, as I understand it. Mm-hmm. Like it's like the first. That marks the beginning of the year. If you want to stay in the Hebrew realm, you have Rosh Hashanah. I guess we say Rosh Hashanah. I don't know how we're supposed to pronounce it. Yom Kippur is in there as well. Ramadan. Not a Hebrew holiday, but yes, Ramadan.
I'm saying it's one of the ones that's, yeah.
Yeah, well, if you go back to the beginning of the Lunar New Year, Chinese New Year, they have a 15-day kickoff. I'm trying to go through the year. You have Holi, Holi, which is that India? I can't remember exactly where that is, but that's only a 2-day celebration. So anyway, you have the era that we're in now with the Gregorian calendar is pretty different from where the majority of human history, like they would really go by seasons and stars and the moon, that sort of thing, because that's how you could mark the passage of time more easily before we had the atomic clock and all this stuff. So there you go. I gave a little lesson to myself.
I love that you were nervous that I was going to quiz you about that.
Well,
You had it right to me because I texted you and said,
you
I'm
told
going to
me.
quiz you.
You really threw me off the scent. It is so funny to me that these couple times a year, all of us band together, all of us except for Indiana and Arizona, shout out to the Navajo Nation, all of us band together and we agree that time travel is possible. We say, yes, we're traveling forward in time together. And we do it, and there's terrifying consequences.
Well, and then we do it again. Yes, like you said, twice a year. How do we convince everyone to do the other one though? That's my question. Like, why do we always just like?
Yeah, let's just agree that it's going to be dark again.
They trick us because they're like, hey, you're going to gain an hour of sleep.
Right.
Whereas like, woo, and then but you're going to have to like an entire season of darkness and depression.
Well, so shout out to Benjamin Franklin, and shout out to America's shout out to America's long history of making fun of the French. Although that history is not as long, because I was thinking about that recently. The French were a huge help during the Revolutionary War. So I feel like maybe we should cool it a little bit. I'm going to start eating French fries again. I've been eating freedom fries for 22 years. Time to get back to our original heritage. Just you? Okay, let's take a look at the sermon So if you're just joining us, which I hope you are, I hope that Jared
cut out
has
the
cut
last
out
3 hours.
everything that we've done up until now, because it's been an embarrassment. But here we find ourselves in Ephesians chapter 2. Pastor is on his way to Egypt. He might be there yet. I'm not sure. Big trip. He said that's scheduled for a while. He had planned to go to Israel as well. That got canceled. So he's just going to be in Egypt. We're going to hear more from him a little bit this Sunday, and then obviously when he gets back. Yesterday he was preaching from Ephesians chapter 2. I've got a lot of notes. I've got some thoughts, but Johanna, I'm bored of myself and my thoughts, and I would much rather hear what your reaction was and what things you'd like to
So
do.
I just kind of put down some of the highlights. I mean, it was an excellent message as always. But at the very beginning, he talks about the lavishness of God's grace, that it is not just enough. It's not just adequate. It is lavish.
Yes.
The lavishness of his grace. And then also, in contrast to that, the full weight of God's wrath was placed on Jesus. And to think about that, he compared it to having a debt that's weighing down on you, which we all know, or most of us probably know how that can feel. And then having someone else come in and say, let me take care of this for you, which I just thought that was a beautiful picture.
Throughout Ephesians, Paul does a very helpful job of reminding us the cosmic significance of who Christ is. I've been doing my morning devotionals in the Gospels. I've been in the book of Matthew now for a while, which shout out to the daily Bible reading plan, because I've been following along with the memorization, and so you're memorizing the Sermon on the Mount, and you get 2 entire chapters of Scripture memorized if you do the whole year. So I'm on track so far, so you guys pray that I'm going to make it all the way. But in Matthew, and I guess with the exception of John, the Gospels a lot of times are just very descriptive. They don't often dig into the theological significance of what's happening. It's just it is a straight up narrative account of what happened. Mm-hmm. And where Paul is so helpful to all of us is he's saying, yes, and when Christ made this sacrifice on the cross, it was of eternal significance. And that's where we come to this text. It lavishes this grace upon us, and it breaks down the dividing wall of hostility. And so Pastor went back to this. It was a theme that he introduced in the previous week about the Jew and the Gentile, mm-hmm. the circumcised and the uncircumcised. And Paul is emphasizing that and Pastor had to help us see that, because we can't, with our modern eyes, understand how deep the divide was between those two groups of people. Right.
Well, I mean, except that he said they would put people to death if they made it past the wall and they weren't supposed to be in there, right?
Well, but that's not in this text, is it?
That's I don't know if it's in Ephesians, but he did talk about, he just did talk about that.
In Acts 21,
Yeah, and how one of someone on the other side of the wall from Paul actually saved him when they said, hey, you guys shouldn't be in here, kind of thing.
You can read that account in Acts 21. Pastor used that as context for this passage. It's likely that Paul was referring, when he was talking about the dividing wall of hostility, he was talking about the wall that would separate, there were actually multiple walls mm-hmm. and multiple barriers, but perhaps the wall that separated the temple grounds from where it allows the Jews in but keeps the Gentiles out. The Gentiles a sign would say that the Gentiles would enter under pain of death. You're taking your life in your hands. The Jews often would execute those who would come in, because they at that point they developed a belief that was contrary to Scripture, because if you go back and read the Old Testament, you see that God was over and over very kind to the sojourner, the person that wanted to appeal to God for mercy and become. And I thought that was very interesting. I'm rambling a little bit, but it's sad. You see why Christ had to be so strong against the religious leaders of the day, mm-hmm. because it's very plain to read in the Old Testament and see that God is slow to anger, abounding in kindness, has eternal steadfast love towards all who would have faith in him. And the Jews were like, no, there's no hope for the Gentiles. Like Pastor was saying, they're basically just sticks of wood that will fuel the fire of hell forever and ever, which is really harsh, but that's pretty much what it says in some of the rabbinical literature of the time. I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, I also just made note of what he said about Jesus himself as our peace, and then he went on to list the places you're not going to find it, which included a lot of, like, you're not going to fall in politics or,
Yes.
On Capitol Hill and Montgomery, like all these places. I do think that's a good reminder as we head into election season.
Yes, election season is so long, is it not?
It's so long. And what I wrote here is what Jesus has done keeps us from being separated from one another. And then he said even any disagreement we have with a brother or sister in Christ should never ultimately end in separation. But these other things that we look to for peace or comfort or reassurance, it's not only do they not offer that peace, they go completely in the other direction. They cause more and more and more division.
Yeah, you can see that. Well, you can see it obviously theologically, and pastors sometimes make mention of like the different theological disagreements that are taking place within the larger Baptist church right now. In politics, it's much, much worse. Obviously, there's the divide in America between the Democrat person and the Republican person. But even within those groups, there's so many things that divide people. Mm-hmm. Why do people get divided over those things? Well, like Pastor was arguing, it's because, if you're putting your heart there, your treasure is found there, that becomes what is most important to you. That becomes what is worth fighting for. And so often we will conflate that with the truth of the gospel when it's not. But even just something as silly as you watch sports talk shows and people are just fighting about sports. Like, why are you fighting about this?
I do that a lot.
Yeah. Well, why do you think we had to cut all that out of this episode, Johanna?
We had the biggest argument about
Yes.
pickleball for about 2 hours before we started this morning.
Who is the greatest of all time in pickleball? Are there professional pickleball players?
Yeah.
There are.
Oh, sure.
There's professional it's really, we're there now?
It's like
Sponsors and everything.
I had no idea.
sport.
So who sponsors them? Is it like Kosher, Dill, Vlasic? Is it
You
not-
veered off into dad joke territory. I'm going to have to bring you back.
Okay,
I'm have to bring you
coming
back.
back. All right, well, a couple of quotes from this message that I thought we need to cherish and remember. This one, I could not stop laughing. Pastor said, I brought you a glass of Get Over It and a straw so you can suck it up. I thought that was great. Pike, did you hear that one? Have you heard that before? Oh, man.
Was he quoting somebody else?
Yeah, he's quoting somebody else. There's something like, I forget why he said it, but man, that got my attention. I brought you a glass of Get Over It, and here's a straw so you can suck it up. I love that. All right, one thing, this is tough to get into, but I think it's worth a mention before we close up shop. He talked about the ways that Christ fulfills the law. The fulfillment of the moral law, the fulfillment of the ceremonial law, and then the fulfillment of the judicial or the civil law. There's a couple of resources online where you can go and read about this a little bit if you haven't thought about it before. Anybody who's watching us that has wondered why do we not have to follow the entirety of the book of Leviticus anymore? I would encourage you to read some about that because obviously Christ, he followed the moral law perfectly, but then elsewhere, and even says this in the Gospels, he declared all foods clean. So there's certain aspects of that of the ceremonial law that Christ has fulfilled and don't apply to us anymore. Don't really even apply to Jews anymore, even though they continue to follow those things. And you have any thoughts on that? I just thought it was worth bringing up. I love it when Pastor gets into
Not
stuff
on that
like
aspect.
Okay.
Yeah. I concur.
You concur?
Yeah.
Why didn't I say why didn't he concur? I love that part. Okay, what are your parting notes, Miss Jo, before we close up shop here?
Parting notes for me, one more note that I made of what he said yesterday. All division is of the devil.
Like including
And
arithmetic?
Yes. I think that applies to all math anyway in general.
Okay.
But Jesus builds unity and brings peace. So my thought was, and again, we never want to get political. I know I certainly don't. However, as we head into a season where those conversations are going to be all around us, they just are.
Right.
I think that's a really good thing to remember. You are not going to agree with everyone. And I also think that it's okay to look that brother or sister in Christ right in the eyeballs and say, I love you, and we don't agree on this, but it's okay because we love Jesus.
And we don't have to talk about it
And I want to
anymore.
pursue peace with you. I do not want to pursue division.
Be a
So
peacemaker. I love that.
look for opportunities because I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of them. And just a side note, this is probably more personal than anything else. Don't talk about this stuff on Facebook and stuff. Just don't.
Please don't do that to yourself
Just don't.
and other people. Have good conversations, hopefully in real life. Peacemaking conversations.
And if you get pulled into something online on social
Repent.
media,
Be kind.
get offline and say, hey, can we sit and talk about this? Or, but just I just don't start.
Well, that concludes our time today. It looks like I got to log on to Facebook and delete some old posts. It's been great spending time with you guys. I have no idea how much time it was because Jared probably cut a lot of this out. But be praying for Pastor as he's on the road, and we'll see you here on Wednesday night, and again this Sunday on the 17th when we've got the Samford Worship Collective with us, leading worship.
Wow, that was very newscaster.
Yeah. And we'll see you then at 9:15.
Since I'm not a pastor, I get to say it. Say goodbye, Pastor.
Goodbye, Pastor.